All right, we are painting the Northern Lights today. And this is something that I've been painting a lot. I don't have an example for you right now because I have sent away, actually, no, that's a lie. I do have an example for you that I can use. The dimensions of the taped part, I believe, are 6 by 8. So 6 inches, 8 inches. And that's just the size that I like to use for the live because I can fit it all in the screen. So here's kind of what we're gonna go for. This is in a different sketchbook, but this is the idea. And watercolor doesn't give you like a photorealistic Northern Lights. This is more of like a, you know, when the viewer looks at it, they're like, oh yeah, that's Northern Lights. But in my opinion, I'll show you this, oil paint gives you the best Northern Lights effect. So this is a painting that I did recently. That's all been varnished and everything. So this is available in my Etsy shop, but this is oil paint and you can really get a good Northern Lights effect on paintings with oil paint, but we're using watercolor today. So it's just gonna look a little different, but it's still gonna be an effect. Again, that painting that I just showed is on my Etsy shop, so if you're interested. There's also another one that I'm still working on. This one's not available yet, but this one's gonna have a tree or two here. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do is mix our colors for this. So the first thing before that is to put a little drop of water with our cup into each of our watercolor pans. And we do this to start to dissolve our watercolor paints, and it makes it much easier for us to use it later. This is how I start off all of my watercolor paintings. It just makes your life a lot easier later. And while we're doing this, just my usual announcements for this paint and sip, just to, you know, this is a fun time for us to spend an hour together painting. Please be nice to each other in the comments. Please be gentle with yourself. If you are new to painting, especially, and new to watercolor, this does take practice. This is a skill that you have to work on. Nobody is a born artist. You do have to work on this. So just take this as like a practice. This is a really fun practice because we get to use a lot of fun colors. But just, you know, be patient and be gentle with yourself and enjoy the process and try not to stress too much about the final outcome. Okay, so get some water in all of your watercolor pans. And I'm going to kind of talk about, while you're doing that, I'm going to talk about the kind of strategy that we want to use here. So what we're going to do is put a layer of water just from our cup on the whole paper here, and then we're going to drop in our Northern Lights colors. I like to use pink, you can see here, and a little bit of like green and turquoise. You can use literally whatever color you want. If you want to use different colors than I'm using, that is fine. Northern Lights come in any color, so if you have a particular color that you really want to use, feel free, throw it in there. And then once we put down those fun colors, we're going to use a dark blue and sort of fill in the area around those colors. And then we'll use a dry brush to pick up these like vertical strokes here, and that will give us a little bit more of a Northern Lights effect. And we have to do that all in the same step. So that's why I'm telling you now that all of that is going to be in the same kind of step. I'm not going to do too much pausing in there because you have to do it all while it's all still wet. So just keep that in mind. There are going to be a few steps like right next to each other. Go at your own pace, but we do have to kind of do that. This texture here, this vertical texture, can only be done while it's still wet. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so our watercolor paint should be nice and dissolved now. So pick like 3 colors that you'd like to use in your Northern Lights painting. I'm going to do this magenta here, and we really want really strong colors. So you're gonna get in there with your brush. Don't be gentle. Really get in there, swirl it around, and then get it onto a section of your palette. And we want this to be really dense, really strong watercolor paint because we're putting it onto water on our paper. We want it to be really strong here so that it has room to dilute and still be a bright color. So I got my magenta. I'm gonna do, let's see, probably like a turquoise would be good. I'll probably just do my usual Northern Lights colors. So I'm going to do this turquoise. If you want to use turquoise and you don't have it, just mix a little bit of yellow into some green and you'll get kind of a greenish yellow turquoise, maybe a little blue in there too. You just have to kind of mix it around and play with it until you get a bit of a turquoise. Okay. Yes, all of the previous paint sips are on YouTube, so you can check them out there. And I think I might do like a dark greenish blue. So again, you can follow my colors if you want, but you can also just choose any bright colors. You know, I'd recommend just choosing 3. They will all blend together in this painting. And the Northern Lights can be any color, so it doesn't matter. Feel free to be creative. Do you use the same brush for all these colors? Yes, I'm washing it off in between. My cup is over here, so I'm just washing off the brush in between those colors. But yes, I'm using the same one. I'm using a big brush right now, so get your biggest brush. Okay, and then the last color is dark blue. And I have this indigo in my palette already, so that's what I'm going to use, is this really, really rich dark blue here. If you don't have this, just mix black and blue together. You just want a really nice dark blue. I'm gonna add maybe a little bit of gray into that too, just for fun. Okay, so you can see that looks black on the in the palette, but it is a dark blue. I'm gonna swatch these for you. Hang on. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, swatch card. So here's that really dark blue. It looks almost black, but once we put it onto the paper with the water on it, it will look dark blue. And then I think you can see we've got those other colors there. Okay, so mix up your colors. Can you add more yellow into the turquoise? You could. I'm not going to because I really like that color, but you definitely can just change up your color however you want. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you'd like to just watch me do these steps here, I can certainly leave you time. It will have to dry after that, so we will have time after I do all of those steps that I described. So if you'd prefer to just watch me doing this and then you can do it after, you can do that and I will leave you time. Okay, so like I said before, I'm going to take my brush and go into my cup and grab some water, and we're just going to put a nice layer of water down on our whole paper. The entire thing. And depending on where you are and how humid it is in your area, you may need to work faster or you may have a little bit more time. If you're in a place that is humid, you will have more time. If you are in the desert or a place that is dry, you will not have as much time. So just keep that in mind. I will probably have like a medium amount of time here in the Midwest. So I'm going to keep that in mind. I've got my whole paper soaked with water here. Now I'm going to go into my colors. You can do this in any order. And we're just going to put in some fun little kind of curves, some paint strokes like this. Feel free to be creative. Start kind of at the bottom here and just curve them up. Something like that. And then I'm going to switch to my other colors. Do the same thing, just kind of adding in some spots with these colors. Maybe I'll have one going like here. Make sure you're leaving some areas that are white. We don't want to fill up the entire thing. And I'm going to go to my green, and I like to layer this green and the turquoise together. I think that looks really cool. And maybe one more over here. Okay, so that's where my Northern Lights are going to go. And then once I'm done putting those in, I'm going to switch to my dark blue here and fill in around these colors here. So I'm just going to, just fill in the spaces that you haven't filled in yet. This is a really fun part of this because you can just be really kind of smooth and swirly with these colors. There we go. And you can see that they're kind of starting to blend together because of that water that we put down on the paper beforehand. And that is the effect that we want. Down here, I'm just going to fill in the rest. Okay, so now it's all filled in. You can leave it like this. If you like how it turns out, you can leave it. I'm going to tilt it a little bit upwards. That will start the paint to run. And then I'm going to take a smaller brush that is completely dry, and I'm going to start making some little vertical lines kind of around these colors. Into the blue a little bit. And you just have to continually dry off your brush as you do this. And this will start to help you get those little highlights there. So you can do this as much or as little as you want, but again, you do have to do it while the paint is still wet, so you have to decide. You can't do it once the paint is dry. And I'm just holding my paper towel here and just continuously drying off my brush. And adding these little short vertical strokes. Okay, so that is all the instruction I have for you on this. Feel free to go forth and give it a try. Again, we covered the whole thing in water, and then you're going to use your colors, your bright colors, to add in the northern lights, and then you're going to use your dark blue to fill in everything else. And then you're going to use a dry brush to pick up some of the paint and add this texture. And it will not turn out the same way twice. Yours will not turn out like mine. Mine will not turn out like yours. This is the kind of thing that you get really unique results every time because it's never the same. Okay. And I'm quite liking how this looks right now, so I might just go ahead and leave this. But it's so hard to just leave it alone, isn't it? If you find that you've lost a little bit of color like I have up here, you can use this dry brush to kind of bring it back as well. Kind of brings back those spots that get lost in the dark blue. Okay, I think that's going to be good. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. So that's what mine is going to look like. We're going to go with it. And I'm going to let this dry. So you have plenty of time right now to do all of this. If you wanted to just watch me do it first, feel free to just catch up. And then I will answer a few art questions in the comments. There we go. So you can see that closer up. And let me see what comments I've missed. Is there a reason you use dark blue instead of black? Yes. So generally, if you look at pictures, when I was prepping to do these Northern Lights paintings, I looked at a lot of pictures, and usually, even though the light, comes in these little waves, the rest of the sky is pretty light, at least in the photography of these Northern Lights. And so if we were to use black, it would kind of dull out the colors a little bit, and it might look too dark. So I like to use the dark blue because it's a little bit lighter, and it's also a color that works with these colors that I used already. Black would kind of create a muddy color. So that's kind of the reason for that. Good question. The sky wouldn't be true black. Yep, I already answered that question. What brushes are you using and what brand of watercolor? These are Princeton Neptune brushes. Again, all of my art supplies are linked in my Amazon storefront. That's nice because it helps me out. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but I do get a small percentage of the sales. So if you're wanting to support me that way, you can find them there. So Princeton Neptune brushes and then Winsor&Newton watercolor paints. Mine looks unfixable. I promise it will look a lot better when we add trees on it. I promise. How much are your bookmarks on your shop? It depends. So sometimes the painted bookmarks are between $15 and $17, I think, because they are hand painted by me every time to order. And then the printed bookmarks are $7 for one, and then it gets cheaper as you order more at a time. So I think it's $12 for two, $20 for four, stuff like that. So the printed bookmarks are cheaper, but the painted bookmarks are hand painted, so that's the difference. How do you prepare your watercolor palette before painting? I talked about this at the beginning, but just adding water to each of the colors, that's a super important thing to do. How many palettes do you have? I have several. Too many. Why do you make a color mix on the side and not just in the paint trays? I mean, so the color mix are in the paint tray. This is attached to the paint tray. But it's always good to warm up your color in a separate area like this. So I don't just take from the paint pan and put it onto my paper, because the paint can sometimes come out in chunks. It can be uneven. So you want to kind of swirl it around in these little pans here, so that it becomes homogenized, and then it's a smooth color when you put it onto your painting. This is also a way to mix colors. So if you're not using color straight out of here and you want to mix it, then you can mix it on these pans. So that's why you do that. Yep, this is Northern Lights. Do you have to wait for it to dry to remove the tape? Not necessarily. You don't always have to. As long as the paint is like a little bit dry, you can take off the tape. We're not done here yet, so don't take off the tape yet. How do you clean the tray after you paint or get the water out of the colors? So the water just dries. I leave this open. I leave the paint palette open, and then for these colors, I just put a little extra water in there, loosen everything up, and then use a paper towel to wipe up everything. Have you ever used the Prismacolor watercolor pencils? I don't think I have. I'm not a huge watercolor pencil gal, so I don't really use them very much. What kind of paper are you using? It is Strathmore watercolor paper. How often do you do these? I do these every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Always recommend leave the tape on until it's dry. Fair enough. Okay. And then one other thing that I want to talk about while we're waiting for this to dry, mine is nearly dry, I am going to add trees onto this, as you can see in this painting here. We're going to add some trees. And I am going to use this ink that I have. This is waterproof India ink from Blick. It's like, I think this is also like $5. And it's just really nice to, when you're painting silhouettes or just like really dark objects, it's nice to have ink so that you don't have to waste a lot of your black watercolor paint. If you don't have this, you can just mix up a dark color in your watercolor palette for these trees, but I'm just wanting to say that now in case you do have ink, or if you'd like to use a pen, you're welcome to as well. Okay. Watching from England. Anybody else have any art-related questions? I can take a couple more before we move on to some trees. Also, I want to mention that my Etsy shop, again, is linked in my bio, so if you'd like to check out my bookmarks, my prints, my paintings, like this Northern Lights painting is available on Etsy. That would be lovely. You'd be my best friend. I am doing holiday sales. I've got holiday stuff on there, so just make sure you check out my Etsy store. It's linked in my bio. Thank you. What weight of paper are you using? It's 140 pounds. I missed how you did the dark blue. So when the paper was totally wet, we put in our Northern Lights colors, and then around the Northern Lights colors, we just filled in everything else with the dark blue. Again, this will be on YouTube later, so if you want to just follow along with this later, in case you missed anything, you can always find it there. My YouTube channel is linked in my bio as well, and all of the other paint and sips are there too. This is the first time I've painted with you that mine turned out bad. Remember, it is not bad. There are no bad paintings. You are just learning. We haven't even put trees on it yet, so it will look really weird right now. I don't love how mine looks right now, but we're just going to put trees on it, and I promise it'll look better. So just stick with me. This also takes practice, so just be gentle with yourself. Can you please show the ink again? Yep, here it is. It's Blick Black Cat Waterproof India ink. This is, make sure you keep this upright and, you know, somewhere it's not going to get knocked over, because I have had ink bottles spill and it will get everywhere and it will not come out. So be careful. Are you an art teacher? Nope, I just teach on TikTok. Okay, can you do that on a canvas? So you can't do the watercolor painting on a canvas. The watercolor paint needs to go on watercolor paper. But you can paint the Northern Lights on a canvas. I will show this again because this is one of my favorite paintings, and I will not stop bragging about it. This is oil paint on a canvas. You can see it's a stretch canvas here. So you could do the Northern Lights on a canvas, but not in watercolor. Can we use black acrylic for the trees? Absolutely, you can. Yeah. You're a wonderful teacher. Thank you so much. Just join. What paint are you using? This is watercolor paint. And I think it looks mostly dry. So I think we're going to get started with the trees. And the rest of this class is going to be a tree class. And I'm going to teach you how to paint trees. Again, it does take practice. So if you can't get it this time, it will be okay. You're going to get it later. And it just takes practice. So I'm going to carefully take the lid off of my ink. And I'm going to be careful about where I set it because, again, I don't want to spill it. So I'm switching to my smallest brush. This is a 0 Princeton Neptune watercolor brush. If you don't have a detail brush, get yourself a detail brush. These are so helpful and so handy. This one is linked to my Amazon storefront. I think it's like $8. Get it, your life will be changed. So get your smallest brush out and get yourself your darkest paint or your ink, whichever you'd like to use. You can use your black watercolor paint, you can use a pen, you can use ink, whatever you want. And we're going to start in the middle here because the trees in the middle are going to be perfectly vertical, and then as we go out, we're going to do this perspective where they kind of shift, the trunks kind of shift to this angle here, which kind of looks like you're looking up into a forest. So in the very middle of your painting, you're going to start with your first tree, and you're just going to draw a vertical line. Don't worry about the thickness. You can get thicker as you get to the bottom if you want, but it doesn't really matter because you're going to cover it all up with ink anyway. Okay, so there's your trunk. And then you're going to start at the top, and I like to start with a little V shape at the top just because that's how I start the trees. And then you're just going to start adding in branches, and they can still be these upward kind of V shapes, and you're just going to add some little twigs onto them. They can be U shapes like this, like kind of shallow U shapes that you then add a little bit of texture onto. So I'm doing a U shape here and then adding a few little lines attached to that U shape there. I'll zoom this in a little bit more. But these branches up here at the top, they should be pretty small, pretty narrow. They should cross over each other a little bit. And I'm just going to start adding more branches as we work our way down. I like these U shapes the most, but feel free to use whatever shape that you want. And we're just going to move our way down. And as we work our way down, they should get very slightly wider every time. So just like the smallest amount, because you don't want to go really a lot wider every time because you'll end up with a big cone tree. And you don't want that. You want a tree that's just getting a little bit wider. Maybe some of the branches don't even get wider as the ones above it, but, you know, a little bit further down they do. So you want to just pay attention to that, not go too wide too quickly. And we're just going to kind of add these. I like to just do these little U shapes, kind of overlapping and going in different angles. And some are shorter, some are longer. We're just going to work our way down. And then if you find that you're leaving too much space in the middle of the trunk, you can just kind of go back and add a little bit more paint so that the middle of the trunk is not so see-through. Okay, so hopefully this is making sense. Why don't you use a fan brush? So fan brushes are good for acrylic paint and oil paint when you're painting trees like this, but they don't work for watercolor paint, in my opinion. Fan brushes require you to have, the fan brush tree thing require you to have stiffer paint, and it doesn't really work for liquids. So instead, we have to paint our trees like this by hand. Okay. And again, just ruined it. No, you didn't. Stop saying that you ruined it. I promise you didn't. This is the thing that I think beginner artists really need to learn, and you need to learn it quickly, which is that A, you will ruin a lot of your paintings. And, you know, ruin, I say in air quotes, because it's just a painting, and it's not, there's nothing that says it's ruined or not. And also, watercolor paintings go through a gigantic ugly stage. It will look really bad a lot of the time before it looks good. And I think beginner artists kind of get discouraged by that because you're like, oh, I've ruined it. I can't get it back. Keep going, finish your painting, and then you can tell me that you don't like it. But don't say that you've ruined it now. We're not done. And I don't mean that as I'm not mad at you or anything. I've heard this a lot. So just please give yourself the chance to finish your painting. And then even if you don't like it afterwards, you can say, oh, that's not my best or that's not my favorite, but we're going to try again. Okay, down here at the bottom, I like to just kind of get a little loose with it. I'm not super carefully painting these branches anymore because down here, all of the other trees are going to kind of combine, and you're not really going to see these branches anyway. So down here, you can just really let it loose, just paint the general idea of a tree. You don't need to worry about how the branches look because the trees are going to overlap down here, and you're not going to see this anyway. So just finish your general tree shape, and you don't need to worry too much about it. So let all your frustrations out on the bottom of your tree. Okay, so there's how our tree looks right now. Got it? Yeah, thank you all for the encouragement in the comments. You're all doing great. And if you are painting right now, that means you are succeeding. The only people that are not artists are the people that do not paint. Okay. So now we're going to do another tree, and as we work out, remember that I told you we're going to kind of do this angled thing. So the trees next to this one are going to be just ever so slightly angled toward the center, and I'm going to do one a little bit shorter than this one. So you can see it's just a little bit angled in there. Okay. And then again, we're going to start at the top with a little V shape. And I'm just going to start adding my branches. Another thing that you can do, if you want to mix it up a little bit, is leave some of this trunk showing. Sometimes trees don't have branches for sections of the tree, and you can kind of leave that like that to show through, which I think is kind of a cool effect. I wouldn't recommend you do it on all of your trees, but it's a cool thing to do to mix up how your trees look. Are you self-taught? I would say mostly. I have been painting since I was a young kid. I did take art classes like in school, the art classes that were offered or I was made to take. And I was an art minor in college, but that was really just so that I could keep making time for art. I never really, I didn't go to art school on purpose, and I never really imagined myself as a full-time artist like I am now, which is really exciting. So no, that was all. I would say most of my skills and knowledge are from practicing on my own and, doing my own sort of art research and stuff like that on the internet. So down here is where I'm saying that these branches are combining, right? So I'm just kind of filling in the bottom of this tree with reckless abandon because it's not going to look like anything down here. You're not going to see the individual tree. You just want to leave a couple spots where you can see through to the sky behind, like there and there, but you're not going to look, it's not going to look like a tree down there. So don't worry about that. What's your first painting? I could not even tell you. I did it when I was probably 3 years old, so I cannot show you my first painting. I don't know where it is or what it was. Okay. So now, next tree, again, I might make this one nice and tall, and this one's going to be more angled. So this one's going to go down to like here. And we're going to start filling this one in too. While we're doing this, if you are enjoying this class today and you'd like to leave me a little tip or a gift for today's lesson, that is always really appreciated. Again, this is a full-time job for me. I do really appreciate tips. It does help me out a lot. So if you go to the link in my bio and you click on it, there is a top tab in there called Tip Jar. and that makes it really easy for you to leave a little tip. So if you're enjoying the class and you'd like to do that, feel free. Anything you want to give is super helpful. I usually get tips between like $5 and $50, so it just really depends on what you feel like. And if you feel like this was worth something to you in some way, then that's a really great, a very much appreciated way for you to show your gratitude for this. So if you're interested in doing that, that link is in my bio. Again, just go to the link in my bio, click on it, and then the top tab in there is called Tip Jar. I have my Venmo listed in my bio as well if you'd prefer that. And/or check out my Etsy shop, which is also linked in my bio. For your holiday gift shopping, I've got lots of bookmarks in there, prints, paintings, all of that. Art makes a really good gift and very thoughtful gift for people for the holidays. So if you're stuck on someone's gift and they like to read, get them a bookmark from my shop, or they need some more decor for their apartment or house, get them a painting or a print. I've got ornaments in there too, so if someone who celebrates Christmas would like an ornament, that's another option. So, all that to say, check out my art store, please. Happy trees. Okay, and again, down here at the bottom of the tree, we're just filling it in with reckless abandon. This is my favorite part. And thank you all for the likes as well. We're up to 23,000 likes, which is really cool. I appreciate that. Okay, and then for the outside tree, I'm just going to do maybe a short one right here. And this one's going to be really angled out to the edge here. So you can see this kind of effect that we're getting here, where it's they're kind of all pointed toward the center. And that angle gets more extreme when you move your way out to these further trees. I'm just going to fill this one in. While we're doing this, if anybody has any art questions, feel free to throw them in the comments. Usually I can talk and paint trees at the same time. What type of paint for the black? Sorry if you've already said. It is India ink. So the brand is Blick, and it's waterproof India ink. It's not very expensive. I believe I have it in my Amazon storefront as well. But I would recommend having some around. It's just really helpful when you're painting silhouettes or dark objects. Because it's just way easier and really nice and opaque and beautiful. Could you use alcohol ink? I think so. I believe you could. How do you clean the ink? So when I clean it off my brush, I just make sure that my brush goes right in my water cup after I'm done painting. So I haven't put my brush in the water yet. But once I'm done painting, immediately I will clean it off in water. And then you don't really have to clean up anything else other than that. Why do you angle the trees? So maybe if I zoom out, you'll kind of see this, and it might be more clear once we get done with all of them. But when it's angled like this, it gives the impression to the person who's looking at your painting that they are standing kind of in the forest and looking up at trees. This is kind of the angle that they will take if you ever stand outside in a forest and you look up, they will kind of curve in towards this spot. And so that's kind of giving us that perspective. You don't have to do it. If you do them all kind of straight up and straight across, it'll look like someone's looking at a forest, like from a field or something like that. But this effect kind of puts you more directly in the forest and like you're looking up at these lights. So that's why I do that. What would be the first thing to study to learn art? I don't know. There are quite a few things that you can study, quote unquote. I would say that just trying different styles and trying different mediums and maybe learning I'm going to say like lights and shadows would probably be the first thing to study. So there's plenty of lessons of this online, but if you look this up, there are exercises about how to picture a light source and how to use a light source. And how to make a painting that looks realistic in terms of where your shadows are and how bright your lights are and all of that stuff. And I think that's probably the most important part, because I think that can throw a painting off a lot. And then after that would be color theory, like someone said. Perspective is another good introductory lesson. Let's see what else. I have little lessons on this as well in my TikTok, in my watercolor lessons. Hello, playlist. That's the word I was looking for. And yeah, color theory is certainly helpful. I don't think it's, you do have to learn how to use light and shadows and all that stuff before you learn color theory, because otherwise you will not, you can learn all about all these colors and stuff, but if you're using them in the wrong way, then your painting will not look right. So yeah, but I don't want that to sound like you have to learn all of those things before you even make a painting. Like that, you should learn that alongside just trying things out and trying out a painting something that you think is fun to paint or that inspires you. You don't have to learn everything, study and learn everything by a book before you start painting. You should just, kind of learn those things by doing and by trying it out. And yeah, so don't feel like you have to wait to start painting. That was a good question. Thanks for letting me get on my soapbox. When painting the Northern Lights, should we paint onto the tape to avoid little circles? Yes, so I mentioned that in my TikTok. I just didn't want to mention it here because I didn't want to confuse you guys. But generally, if you sort of end a brushstroke while it's still on the paper, you will get a little circle of paint, and that can kind of throw off the illusion for the Northern Lights. I didn't really talk about that in this one, but if you want more details on that, I have a couple TikTok videos, and then also my Patreon tutorial for this month was the Northern Lights, a slightly different scene than this. So if you want some more information on how to paint the Northern Lights, or you just want to try it with a different lesson, feel free to check out my Patreon or my TikTok. Okay, and we're adding another tree here. Thanks, Mom, for answering all the questions that I'm missing. Any other art-related questions that anybody has while we're zen out painting these trees? Remember that these do just take practice. As you get more used to them, you'll start to be able to do them much faster, a little bit looser. But you just have to paint a lot of trees. How much is your Patreon? I've got lots of different levels. So I've got 4 different levels. I believe the first one is $3.50 per month. So if you don't know what Patreon is, it's just basically like a subscription service to me. And you support me in a monthly fashion. And then you get little perks and gifts and stuff like that. So $3.50 is the first tier, and you get an exclusive art tutorial. It's not always watercolor. Sometimes it's acrylic, gouache, watercolor, stuff like that. And you get that once a month. Then it goes up to $10, and you get that tutorial plus a print, an original art print of mine. Then $25, you get the tutorial, the print, and a painted bookmark. And then $45 is the last tier, and you get all of those things plus a 4x6 original painting from me. So you can kind of choose which level you'd like, what works for you, what works for your budget, and what you'd like from me. I think you should just change your name to Hannah's mom, not Zuzu Pick. Change your username. What's your favorite art medium? It changes. I don't have one in particular that I could say is definitely my favorite. I do watercolor, gouache, acrylic, and oil paint, and I will kind of mix it up. So sometimes I want to paint a certain thing and it will be easiest in a certain medium, so I'll just use that one. And then sometimes I'm just feeling like painting with a certain medium and I will find a reference photo or something to paint that will work with that medium. So it's fun because it keeps me from getting bored. I'll go through phases where I'll paint a lot in watercolor and ignore my oil paint. I'll go through phases where I'll just oil paint and only watercolor when I need to. Stuff like that. I just kind of bounce around, which is really fun. Acrylic gouache or regular. It is regular gouache, the kind that you can reactivate. I don't want to mess with acrylic gouache because you can't reactivate it. And to me, that's the whole point of painting with gouache, is being able to blend it and reactivate it and do all that stuff. So I prefer to work with regular gouache. Alrighty, so there's my final tree, I believe. You can see, hopefully you can see that perspective there kind of coming through. Actually, I might do one more kind of hiding down here. Yeah, right there. Just kind of fill in this area here. And mine looks good now. See, I told you. You gotta wait till the end. Watercolor has a massive, ugly stage. It has to look really bad before it can look good. And maybe I'll add one more. So you can add these little short trees in here, just kind of in the in between your taller trees, and this will give a little bit more perspective as well. It'll look like the forest keeps going behind these specific trees that we can see. So if you want to do that, that's an option. These are really easy because you really just have to do the trunk and kind of just, again, loosely throw in some branches, and it will still look like a tree to your viewer. There we go. Okay. And if you waited till this end point here, you are lucky enough that you get to see the tape reveal, which is honestly always the best part. So here we go. Now, as I'm doing this, remember that if you enjoyed today's session you'd like to leave me a tip or a gift, that is always very much appreciated. If you click on the link in my bio, the first tab in there is called Tip Jar, and that makes it really easy. So if you'd like to leave me a tip, you can do it that way. Again, that is always appreciated. If you'd like to check out my Etsy store, you'd be my best friend. I have lots of holiday stuff in there and just regular art that would be great for gifts for people or for yourself if you want to just buy yourself a little bookmark or a painting or whatever. That Etsy store is linked in my bio as well.